presentation on creating an ability awareness training. My name is Felicia Barnhart, and I am the program supervisor with the Therapeutic Recreation Program for the City of Colorado Springs. The Therapeutic Recreation Program provides year-round recreation opportunities for youth and adults with disabilities, ranging from community trips, day camps, to arts and culture activities. Here's a short video that tells you a little bit more about what we do.
Here are 3 letters you need to know about TRP. That stands for Therapeutic Recreation Program. It is an important part of Colorado Springs. TRP serves youth and adults with disabilities by offering specialized inclusive activities to help them function, grow, and thrive. For more information about this program, visit the website, like TRP on Facebook.
Before we get started with the presentation, we'd like to take a moment to allow the TRP team to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sarah Braun. I am also a certified therapeutic recreation specialist, and I am a program coordinator, and I also serve as the inclusion coordinator for our department.
Hi, I'm Mark Snow. I am a certified therapeutic recreation specialist as well, and I am a program coordinator with the Therapeutic Recreation Program.
Hi everyone, my name is Casey Grice. I am also a certified therapeutic recreation specialist, and I am the recreation assistant for the Therapeutic Recreation Program.
Hi, I'm Ashley Bourdney. I'm a certified therapeutic recreation specialist, and I'm a program director with the Therapeutic Recreation Program.
I'm Natalie Taylor. I am the City of Colorado Springs Therapeutic Recreation Program's intern for fall 2020. I am a student from Central Michigan University studying recreational therapy with a minor in leadership.
Today we're going to talk about how to build your own ability awareness training designed to put you in a position to educate others about supporting individuals with disabilities. We've given this presentation various amounts of times to different programs ranging from frontline YMCA staff to teens at one of our local community centers. The purpose of this training is to gain a better understanding and acceptance for individuals with disabilities. By no means are these simulations meant to make fun of or show exactly what it's like to have a disability. This training was designed to benefit students, frontline staff, individuals with leadership positions, new staff hires, really anyone who may work with an individual with a disability and would like to better educate themselves. Our goal is to give you the tools to create your own awareness training that best fits your audience.
Let's take a moment to go over our learning objectives for today's session. First off, we want to give you an opportunity to simulate different disabilities. By doing this, we hope to increase your awareness of ability versus disability, and just to give you a different perspective on what it might be like to see things differently. Secondly, we'd like to give you an opportunity to example your own attitudes and feelings about disabilities. We have a lot of times where you want to ask, how did this make you feel? Or was it surprising? Did you feel differently than you thought? And thirdly, we want to increase your awareness and encourage an attitude of inclusion and diversity at your facility and at your programs.
Now we're going to be moving into our different disability simulations.
So our first simulation is going to be showing what it might be like to have dyslexia. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that affects an individual's ability to read. So letters may be upside down, inverted, spaces may not be there, and it really affects the way that they see the written language. There's several different types of dyslexia. Another type is dyscalculia, which has to do with numbers. It could affect the way the participant sees numbers backwards or upside down, and how they can interpret math facts. And a third is dysgraphia, which affects the way somebody writes and the ability to actually do writing, and affects fine motor skills. So now we're going to turn it over to Natalie to actually explain how we're going to set up the simulation.
For this activity, everyone will need a handout with a star on it. It's included in your handout packet. They'll also need another sheet of paper. This sheet of paper will help make sure the participants are focusing on the mirror and the object in there rather than their actual hand on the piece of paper. You'll also need a mirror. We got these stand-up mirrors at Walmart in the beauty section. And so when you set that up, make sure that you can see the full sheet of paper. You'll also need a pen for the activity. And if it's easier to have participants have someone else, a partner, holding the sheet of paper, so that way they can focus on the writing throughout the activity. If you notice during the activity that some participants have some time near the end while others are completing the star, then you can have participants write their name to the side. So we'll move into the actual activity.
Okay, so Natalie is all set up for her simulation. I'm gonna hold the piece of paper over her so she can get started, so she's not tempted to look down at her hand versus the mirror. So of course the challenging part in this is focus. Your brain is seeing the mirror image and your hand is trying to follow along, but it's really difficult because your hand and your brain are not working well together. So the purpose of this is to show, like, it's really hard. You have to kind of retrain your brain to figure out to do what you're trying to do. It could be, looks like a very simple activity, but it can be very frustrating because your body is not doing what your brain is telling it to do. So after everybody has had a chance to complete the simulation, be sure to give time for everybody to debrief and kind of talk the activity out, ask what was frustrating, what was easy, was it frustrating? Maybe it wasn't for somebody else, but also make sure that they have a chance to really think about what it might be like to have to do that in your everyday activities, whether you're reading a rule book or you're reading something for an activity, and to have to retrain your brain to look at everything differently. So just to put it in perspective of everyday life. So Natalie's going to talk about some different accommodations and how you can make things easier for folks with dyslexia in your programs.
Some ways that you can support people with dyslexia in your program could be to simplify or clarify written directions. You could also read directions out loud, or if you can, possibly block out some distractions that you might have, whether that's music or any other auditory things that could be distracting. With that, we're going to move into our next activity, which will simulate what it might be like to be a person with a hearing impairment.
The term hearing impairment is used to describe people with any degree of hearing loss. Typically, hearing loss is categorized as slight, mild, moderate, severe, or profound. This depends on how well an individual can hear frequencies that are commonly associated with speech. For some, hearing may be possible with the use of a hearing aid, lip reading, sign language, or written text. For this activity, we are going to be focused mainly on lip reading. If you were in a group setting, you would split participants into groups of two. One participant, who would be completely silenced, would be mouthing words to the other, who would write down what they believe is being said to them. In this activity, I am going to mouth words directly to you 3 times and then move on to the next words. So please grab a piece of paper and a pen and get ready to write down the words that I am saying to you. Okay, everyone, we're going to get started with our first word. Second word. Our third word. Fourth word. Fifth word. And our final word. We will now review all the words. The first word was finger, finger. Second, break, break. Third, down, down. Fourth, start, start. The fifth word was finish, finish, and the last word was handle, handle. How did everybody do? Before we move on to our next simulation, I want to go over some tips and tricks when working with someone with a hearing impairment. The first would be to go slow and take your time. There's no need to rush through a conversation. It could definitely help someone better understand. You could also ask for clarification. A light tap on the shoulder, pulling someone aside just to make sure that they received all that information could be very helpful if they are not willing to ask. Third would be to use an exaggerated face. Another would be to look directly at them to make sure that they can see your mouth. And then the final would be to avoid covering your mouth. It can be a little challenging to understand what I'm saying if I have my hands in front of my face. Next, we are going to move into a simulation focused on visual and fine motor impairments.
In this simulation, we are going to cover visual impairments and fine motor impairment. We're going to talk about the necessary supplies as we go through different parts of the simulation, but to begin, you want to have an assortment of beads, like we have here, and you want them in different shapes and sizes just to add to the level of difficulty. You also want to have some string. We're going to use some twine, but you can use leather cord or yarn, whatever makes it a little more difficult as well. We don't recommend fishing line because any bead can slip on a fishing line, and this one's a little bit easier to hold. Now, let's get into the simulation. For the first part of our simulation, we're going to cover visual impairments that someone with a brain injury or someone with cerebral palsy might encounter. So Casey has on a pair of goggles, and you can find these at any hardware store. They're very inexpensive. And notice that we have different colors all over them, and the colors don't matter, but that the colors are patchy. That's what we're trying to go for. And they're covered with Mod Podge to blur his vision and create holes in it, similar to what someone with a brain injury or with cerebral palsy might experience. So he's going to start to bead, and as he's beading, notice how he has to tilt his head to try and get the beads and his string into his line of sight. Some individuals who have this level of visual impairment may have to bring items very close to their face or hold it further away to be able to see, or they'll have to tilt their head. Now we want you guys to experience what it looks like from Casey's perspective. So we're gonna hold up a set of goggles, very similar to what he's encountering right now, into the camera so you can see how it blurs your vision.
For this next part of the simulation, we are going to be going over farsightedness, or for individuals who have tough time seeing up close. So Sarah is going to be putting on her goggles that are covered in, right now, Mod Podge. We also recommend to use Vaseline, but that can get a little bit messy. And it's just a nice coated layer over those goggles. So the difference between these goggles and the first one is there isn't those spots that you can kind of turn your head and look through. With this one, it's a lot more blurry vision, so you'll have to hold it up close to really see those beads to put on a string. You may notice with participants that they can't really tell the size of the holes that are on the beads, so it makes it for a bigger challenge to find beads that correctly fit on your string. Here's what it looks like through the goggles from Sarah's perspective.
Our last visual impairment that we're going to simulate is total blindness. So notice that Casey has a bandana on his face. Now this you can find at any store. They're pretty inexpensive. We're not going to hold this one up to the camera for obvious reasons because it's just dark then. But you could simulate this one yourself if you don't have a bandana on hand. Maybe you have a nighttime eye mask, or you can just close your eyes and hope you don't cheat and try and open your eyes. Now, the difficulty with this simulation is if you're expecting individuals to pick a particular color, it can be impossible for them to decide what that is. It's also a little more difficult to determine the size of the hole. So the individual has to rely much more on their hands and touch to be able to see which beads to string.
For the final part of our simulation, we're going to be going over fine motor impairments. For this activity, Sarah's going to be wearing a pair of gloves and it has cotton balls pushed to the ends of the fingertips. That's important to do so your cotton balls kind of create a hinder for you to grab things. Think about picking up the beads or picking up a pen or pencil and how challenging that could be with cotton balls in the bottom. We also recommend using a pair of swim gloves if cotton balls and gloves aren't readily available. With this simulation, it could be challenging to pick up the beads. Sarah could focus on one specific beads, but try to pick it up and pick multiple up at the same time. It also may be a challenge to hold that string. She may grab it at different points. This simulation overall is to simulate what it may be like to have a traumatic brain injury or cerebral palsy.
And now let's debrief. We reviewed several different disability impairments through this simulation, and now we want to talk through some of the specific debrief questions for this simulation. Please refer back to the general debrief questions that were mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, but we also wanted to share some other ones to consider as well.
Sarah stated we've gone over multiple different portions of this simulation. When we do this activity with a group, sometimes you'll get someone who wants to blindfold themselves and put on a fine motor glove right away and really challenge themselves. That can create a lot of frustration within someone, and they may want that or may have that person give up for the rest of the time. So we recommend just doing one activity at a time. If someone is excelling with the blindfold on or with one of the other goggles on, we do recommend you do add in that glove. So it adds that extra challenge and gets them into the activity.
You can also change up the variety of beads. Notice that we have different sizes holes for all the beads that are in here, if you can see that close. Now, we also throw in a couple of oddballs. This is a dried kidney bean, and these are little pom-poms. So when you feel in there, you think it could be a bead, but you can't find the opening. This also goes back to making sure that when your staff are going to do this simulation and facilitate it, that you have the necessary supplies on hand, because having to string kidney beans is really, really difficult and your group may quit on you. We also want you to consider the instructions that we gave for this simulation. We were just going to be stringing beads, and we're making friendship bracelets in case you didn't know, or if you just wanted to make a keychain. However, we gave you what kind of material to wear and what we were simulating as we went through it. However, neither Casey nor I offered to help each other. We didn't say you could ask the facilitator for any assistance. That is allowed. So when you debrief with the group, if none of them asked you for support and you ask them how could you make this activity less frustrating or less challenging, I always like to throw out there, but did you ask me to help? When I can see and I can feel, and I could have handed you beads that would have fit on the string. That's my favorite one to throw at the group. And now let's move on to the next simulation.
This activity will be used to simulate autism spectrum disorder. Autism is a disability that affects the functioning of the brain and is on a spectrum, meaning that individuals with autism range from mild to more severe. This also means that individuals with autism are all different. Every individual is unique in things that bother one individual, or things that one individual may focus more on may not bother, may not even affect another individual with autism. For this reason, this simulation will not be all-inclusive of every individual. It will just give you more input into how individuals with disabilities, especially autism, can focus on one thing more than other individuals such as you or I. Things like sound, things like light may bother this individual where it may not affect you or I the same way. For the simulation, it's better to do it as one group versus individualized for one person or broken into partners. As a facilitator, you'll also need more than one facilitator to facilitate the activity. It's better to have multiple people with multiple types of sensory input that can manipulate the environment. These two individuals will be used as our other facilitators who will be doing this and manipulating the environment. I will be doing some simple math problems that have been changed a little bit around. All of the symbols have been changed to make it more complicated for this individual to focus and to attend to the task at hand. We'll now move into our simulation so you can see what it looks like in person. For this activity, you'll have 1 minute to complete as many math problems correctly as you can. Time starts now. And time stops now. Next, we'll be going into more details about the simulation itself.
Now we're going to take a minute to talk about some of the distractions that we used in the simulation. We tried to cover as many of the senses as possible. The first one we used was sandpaper. So we used that as more of a touch, and that can be something like a tag in somebody's shirt or the texture of clothing that just doesn't feel quite right. Next we used a feather, and that could be something for a lighter touch. Maybe it's a hair that's just laying on your arm that you just kind of can't get away from. We also used a clapper, and this is to be something to simulate something like maybe doors closing in the background or somebody opening up drawers and slamming them, so different background noises. We also use a bag of chips, probably our favorite. It's a very annoying noise, but it could be somebody in the background opening up their snack. It could be somebody taking a piece of paper and balling it up, and that crinkling sound. And we also used a spray. This is a lavender essential oil and water spray just to kind of have that smell. It could be somebody's cologne is really strong, or perfume or lotion, and that smell just is like permeating, and so that's what the use of the spray was for. And then we also had a whistle, and that could be traffic noise in the outside that you can hear through the window. We also use lights coming on and off. That could be a fluorescent light bulb that it's starting to go out and it kind of flickers, but to you and I, we could probably just kind of put that in the background, but somebody with sensory issues, it could be like the lights coming off and on. And then the last we used was more music or background noise. That could be a radio playing in the background, somebody's music, a TV, or somebody's phone watching a video. So lots of sensory simulations. And lastly, what we'll do is we'll have Ashley go through some debrief questions that you can do with your group after the simulation's over.
For this debrief portion, we'll discuss just a few questions that you can ask specifically for this simulation. One is to ask your group to think about their typical environment, places they regularly go, and think about any distractions that they would run across. Your next question that will build off of this one would be to, as a facilitator, think about ways that you can change or reduce these distractions for an individual who does have autism. As a final question, ask what are some ways that you can have or that you can introduce coping strategies for individuals with autism, such as covering their ears if there's too much sound sensory input, or covering their eyes if there's too much light or sight input. We'll also provide additional questions at the end of our presentation in a document form.
In this activity, we're going to be simulating a physical disability, specifically focusing on having limited mobility within your hands. During this activity, we'll be doing 2 tasks. One will be writing with your non-dominant hand. This represents what it may be like to have one-sided weakness, like people who have experienced a stroke or a traumatic brain injury. The next activity we'll be doing is drawing without use of either hands. This will be simulating a condition that impacts both sides. With that, we'll be moving into the setup.
The setup for this activity is actually very inexpensive. All you need are sheets of paper and a writing utensil. We're going to use pens today, so that way it shows up on camera much clearer, but you can use pens, colored pencils, you could use markers, whatever you have on hand is easy to do this simulation. And now let's get into the activity. To start this activity, you can either have participants copy a simple image or a picture, or you could have them write out words or spell their name. Today, we're going to each spell out our names. So to start, Natalie is going to use her dominant hand, which is her left hand, to write out her name. So you can see how she holds the pen in her hand and how she writes her name. So that way we get an idea of how she forms the letters. So very legible, easy to read. Next, we're going to have her switch to her non-dominant hand, which is her right hand, and we are going to have her write out her name again, trying to form the same shapes with the letters. Now you may notice that it's a struggle for her to form the exact same shapes with the letters because this hand isn't as well practiced. Now, some individuals who have sustained a stroke have to teach themselves how to write with the opposite hand if they were a dominant hand writer with one side versus another. She did actually really, really well. She must be practicing.
All right. For the next portion of this activity, we're going to be drawing without our hands. We're going to test out a couple different techniques, but for this first one, we're going to try holding the pen in between our wrists.
Sometimes it takes a minute to get it there.
Yes. There are multiple conditions that could cause someone to write this way. One example is multiple sclerosis. If it travels from your hands down to your wrist, it might be easier to hold the pen in between your hands. For this next technique, we're going to try holding the pen in our elbow. If you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, it might be easier to pull that shirt up. One diagnosis that might experience writing this way could be someone who has experienced an amputation. And the last technique we're going to be trying today is holding the pen in our mouths. Someone that might write like this could be someone who has lower mobility in their upper extremities, so it might be easier to write holding the pen in their mouth. Once everyone is done, you can instruct the group to hold up their pieces of paper and to pair up with a partner and share what you drew. Now we're going to move into the debrief portion and talk about some questions. An important debrief question for this activity is which technique worked best for you and why? Once you've asked that question, you can expand and say that supporting people with physical disabilities is very personal to each person. Not every technique will work best for every person. So it's important to ask the person individually what works best for them. We also have more debrief questions attached to the presentation documents.
Next, we'll have Mark, who will discuss Words with dignity and person first language.
Person first language is a pretty straightforward concept where you literally just put the person first when you're talking about them or referencing them in a conversation. The idea is that you focus on the individual instead of their disability. This is our Words with Dignity handout. We got this handout from a group called Paraquad. It's paraquad.org is their website, and it's a great disability advocate group. We'll also include a copy of this document in our attachments to this presentation. But this Words with Dignity handout we use in all of our ability awareness presentations to really bring home some of the concepts and ideas that we've talked about throughout the presentation. This is our chance to give real world examples so people know what they can or should not say when talking about or talking to someone with a disability. By no means is this document perfect. There's certainly no perfect when it comes to really human beings at all, but especially working with people with disabilities. But it's best practices in terms of defaulting to the most respectful you can be. The first section of this document gets into details about what to say or not to say when talking about or talking to someone with a disability. While it does address person first language, it also covers a lot of other topics. And we really enjoy the back and forth because there are people who don't necessarily know how to work with people with disabilities, or other people who may have an idea of what they could say or what they have said. And this document, the way they have it formatted, is a great opportunity to show, instead of saying it one way, say it this way. And it gives some people real world examples and real vocabulary that they can use to address or work with someone with a disability. Further down in the document, they talk about some words that are, when used referencing an individual with a disability, really give a sense of pity and might even evoke fear. You see this a lot in news stories where they sensationalize the fact that somebody has a disability. People with disabilities are just like you and I. They're unique and special in their own different, and those differences should be celebrated instead of pitied. And so we encourage you to not use the words that are on this sheet, and we encourage you to share that with your audience. Some words to stay away from when you're talking about somebody with a disability. At the bottom of this document, this section talks about ways to reference particular disabilities. If you're not sure, this gives a good list of what you can say, some good verbiage that people can use in their everyday vocabulary. Here is the organization where this document came from, Paraquad, including their website. The second page of the document talks about basic guidelines for working with people with a disability. The first line you'll notice is about person first language. It's putting the emphasis on the person first instead of their disability. People with disabilities, like I said, are unique. So just because someone might have Down syndrome doesn't mean that they're identical or even similar to someone else who has Down syndrome. So referencing the individual first really draws into focus who they are as a unique person instead of who they are defined by their disability. Handicap is a word that's referenced here that we don't really use anymore. It's antiquated, as is the R word, retarded or retard. Those are words that really aren't used anymore and actually are pejorative terms for people with disabilities. So we encourage you to highlight that point with your audience. The next section of this document highlights common courtesies when working with people with disabilities. It might be surprising that some people have never interacted with somebody with a disability ever in their life. And so one of the points that we like to bring up and share with everybody is, for example, if someone uses a wheelchair, to treat that wheelchair as an extension of their personal space and to not play with it or sit on it or lean on it or put your foot on it. It is considered a part of that person, and so to be respectful like you would to another human being. Also, if somebody has a hearing impairment and they're using a sign language interpreter to translate for them, you'll want to talk directly to the individual you're talking with instead of to their interpreter who's speaking to you. And that's just common courtesy that a lot of people don't necessarily know. The last part of this document is the conversation section. I really do enjoy this information that's provided here, especially about halfway down on the left side, is the word relax. That word could not be used enough in terms of working with people with disabilities. There's such an idea that everything has to be perfect and you can't say the wrong thing to somebody with a disability. You're not going to speak perfectly all the time. In fact, this document is not perfect. It's not going to provide all the information that you need to work with somebody with a disability, but it gives you a baseline to start. And the idea is that you are human, to go out and be human, but just do the best that you can. Be as respectful as possible, be as mindful as possible as you can about celebrating unique differences among people instead of focusing on their disability. So in terms of working with somebody with a disability or communicating with them, relax. If you make a mistake, it's okay. If you're not sure, it's okay. Ask for help, ask for guidance, and just try to do better the next time. It's really not going to be perfect every time. There is a concept called person-centered language where somebody with a disability might identify to you how they want to be addressed, such as somebody with autism might say, I have autism, I am autistic, please call me autistic. Whereas autistic is more of an adjective. That's how that person wants to be defined. But if you aren't sure how to address someone with autism, you simply use the person-first language concept where you identify the person first and then their disability. You may not even want to include their disability, especially if it's not relevant to the story. If you're talking about somebody who dunked in a basketball game, it may not even be important that they also have Down syndrome. They might actually be an excellent basketball player, and having a disability may not even be relevant or important at this point. So next I want to show you a video about our friend Bob, who's horribly awkward, but provides some good information for how to work with and interact with people with disabilities. Next I'm going to show you a video we like to call the Bob video. This video was produced by the Office of Disability Rights out of the District of Columbia a number of years ago, but a lot of the concepts still apply. We like to finish with this video in our presentation because it is kind of lighthearted and humorous, and basically it follows the story of Bob, who's kind of awkward and isn't sure how to work with people with disabilities, ultimately learning how to do that. It's a pretty short video, about 3 minutes and 40 seconds long, but it's a great opportunity to show that people are human, like I mentioned in the document when we reviewed that just a moment ago, that people are human and we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, to just try to learn and do better. So it's a really fun video, so we'll talk more about it afterwards.
Good morning, Bob. Good morning there. Hey, man. Morning, Alice! There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What? Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
No, I think he said he was gonna come. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath, relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, lady. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Alice.
Morning.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human. There's no need to be awkward.
Okay, it's a funny video, right? It's personally one of my favorites, and my coworkers like to give me a hard time because I love it so much. But I love it because it is humorous. It's designed to be humorous, and that lightens the mood for everybody, and it takes kind of a heavy topic and makes it much more lighthearted, so people are more willing to listen and more willing to learn. Because it is designed to be humorous, I do recommend that you mention that before you show the video. Just give people a heads up, hey, it's a funny video, it's okay to laugh along. A lot of the jokes are pretty funny, and a lot of things that happen in the video are pretty silly. It's okay to laugh along, and that'll ease the kind of the anxiety for some people who may not be comfortable laughing or feel like it's the wrong thing to do during that video. By all means, that is what is designed to happen in that video. The main key points out of that video that we like to discuss are that people with disabilities are people. They're human beings. They're out in the world interacting with us on a daily basis. They hold jobs, they live independently, they volunteer, they vote, they're in relationships. And those people are out in the community, and when you interact with somebody, you have an opportunity to connect with them in real time, in a real world, and give them an opportunity to show you who they are. And that's a really cool part of this video, is to show that people with disabilities are awesome, and they are neat, and they are interesting if we can just give them a chance to communicate with them, to teach us about themselves. Also, treat them with respect. It's pretty easy. You think it's a foregone conclusion to treat others with respect, but it is a key topic out of this presentation, that people with disabilities deserve respect just like everyone else. Lastly, towards the end of the video, I do enjoy the final statement out of the video is go forth and be human. And that's a really key topic that I talked about during the handout, and then again, you saw it in this video, is that working with people with disabilities isn't an absolute perfect system. There's no right thing to say all the time ever. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. The key thing is to apologize, to ask for more information, to learn more, and just try to do better. But ultimately, be a human being and try to connect with other human beings. It's seemingly an easy topic that some people have trouble with, but hopefully this presentation kind of brings together some real examples for individuals so they can treat people with respect and further connect with them on a deeper level. Next, we're going to have Felicia wrap up the presentation.
We hope that our training today gave you a new and different perspective, and also showed that sometimes making small and simple adjustments to your program can make a huge difference in making somebody feel included. We've covered a lot of information in a very short amount of time. We provided many handouts and attachments and hope to give you as much information as possible. Please feel free to contact us, and we'd love to talk you through any questions you may have. This is one of our favorite trainings to do. It's so versatile, it's interactive, it's hands-on, and we're really excited to be able to bring this to you today. As we wrap up our presentation, we really hope that you can bring all this information, create a training that's your own. Take it, do training for your volunteers, training for your front desk staff, your facility staff, your campers. Really make it your own. This training truly exists to create awareness, break down boundaries, and ultimately create an environment where everybody plays, everybody participates, and nobody sits on the sidelines. Thank you so much for joining us today.